Hi, this is Mahmoud Mansi from HRTV. We're now in Dubai in the HR Summit and Expo, and we are about to have a very interesting interview with my friend Drew over here. Drew McMillan is the head of the colleague communication and engagement in British Airways. So I find your job title extremely interesting. Yeah, colleague communication, and usually it's head of employee engagement, and that's it.
Yeah.
And Drew comes from a 22 years background of experience in employee engagement before we even know what employee engagement meant. So maybe he's one of the founders of that.
I'm not sure that I'm one of the founders, but I certainly was there at the beginning, I think, yeah, when very few businesses were really investing in this idea that if your people are more engaged, you get a better business outcome as well. So that was quite new thinking. There was a lot of talk about employee satisfaction, but satisfaction, as you know, and engagement are not the same.
Yes.
Not the same thing.
Yes, indeed. So back then, let's just remember, go back.
Rewind?
Yeah. How did you first practice employee engagement while it was still not a common thing? There is no much references about that. Now there are many references.
Yeah.
So how did you do that at the very beginning?
I think, the principles of employee engagement are really simple. So I think a lot of the academic research is very interesting, but the theory is simple. If people have a clear sense of direction, if they have a good line manager, if they have a fair deal with their employer, if their well-being is cared for, and if the organization is communicative, I believe you get employee engagement. So I was primarily interested in the communication piece, but it was the communication of strategic purpose, strategic direction, business value. By communicating those things well, my remit began to expand further into other aspects of the employee journey. So around their well-being, around line manager development, and almost over a process of evolution, that became employee engagement.
That's very interesting story. Yeah.
So I would love to pretend that it was some big, clever plan, but it just sort of happened by accident in the late 90s and the early noughties with some very progressive companies. So they were willing to embrace this thinking.
And then you decided, you fell in love with this career, and you decided you want to focus on employee engagement.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, many of the researchers, they would say that employee engagement is related to retention and so on. I believe in that, but I still believe I know people who are very engaged in their jobs, and they can still quit their job for any other reason and so on. So what other impacts does employee engagement leave other than retention?
So it's really around an optimized workforce. So if you think about, for example, sickness absence, in the West, sickness absence is a big issue in big employers. So a company like British Airways with so many people, it only takes 1% of our people to be regularly sick from work, and that has a big cost. We know from the science that the more engaged you are, the less time you take sick from work. So that's one really important one. There's another piece around the ability to give a really great customer service. We're a customer service business. If our people are more engaged with British Airways, they will give our customers a better experience. And if they give our customers a better experience, we're more successful as a business.
The customer will be engaged as well.
Absolutely right. The two things for me are completely linked, and that's why British Airways, our people strategy, which includes employee engagement, and our customer service strategy are the same strategy. We think it's absolutely essential that that's the way we do it.
I'm very curious that in British Airways, in an industry like that, the pivot roles are the people who are actually on the airplane. That's true?
Yeah.
So how do you keep someone who is traveling most of the time engaged? I find this very challenging.
It's very hard because about 20,000 of our people, cabin crew, pilots, are traveling all the time, as you say. They're not all gathered together in one location. They don't come into contact every day with a line manager. So how do we keep them in the family? We use technology a lot. So we're improving the way that we use mobile to communicate with them and allow them to have conversations with the business. And we also have to get smarter around how we use the time that they do have together. So when you are going to fly a plane or serve on board a plane, you must have a safety briefing at the very beginning of that flight.
Yes.
It's 15 minutes. If we use just 5 minutes of that 15 minutes to talk about business issues, people development, good news stories, that's a clever way of using our resources to get better employee engagement.
Do you believe that they are interested from their job because, as you say, it's not an office job, they're far away from the office. You think they are motivated to know more about the strategy of the company, about the future goals of the company?
Absolutely, but only if it's in the context of what it means for them. I think that's true for all of us, actually. That's how I feel. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a conversation about business strategy, but I would call it a conversation about where we're trying to go as a business and the part that we have to play in that.
And how they're going to lead it, actually.
Absolutely.
Because they are, eventually, they are the leaders. They are the leaders of the business. Another common perception on employee engagement, sometimes we have conversations with people here and there from different organizations. Do you think that employee engagement is having birthday parties, which it could be part of the engagement, birthday parties, outings, letting employees attend the monthly meetings. So is this the common perception of engagement, or it could be there's a different angle for it?
I think a bit like HR in general, sometimes employee engagement is seen as soft and fluffy and it's all about fun. And that's an important thing, right? I believe fun in the workplace makes more productive people.
Of course.
But there's some very hard science involved in employee engagement that can directly map onto business success. So no matter who I speak to, even very senior finance directors who of course always want ROI, they always want the return on the investment, I can argue with them a very good case that by investing in clearer strategic direction, better line managers, a fairer working deal for our people, a healthier workplace, I'm going to return more profit back to the business. And I can have that argument because I've got the data.
You got the data and the experience, of course, for that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I've got no hair.
Another thing that crossed my mind just right now is through the engagement process, I believe that what is also exciting about engagement is that it's involved in incentives, in rewarding, it's involved in performance management, in learning and development. So engagement is not just activities done. No, it's involved in, I guess you work with all the HR leaders to build an effective engagement plan. So let's assume if you are working in consultancy, you're a consultant and you're going to approach an organization to build an engagement strategy for them. Who are the key persons that we should talk to first? What is the process?
First of all, I would speak to the business leaders, not the people team, not the HR team. Speak to the business leaders and understand what their business goals are, because it all starts with the business goal. The HR is just an enabler. The engagement is an enabler of that business goal. So understand that first of all. Within the HR function, I think there are a number of key people to talk with. Whoever looks after learning and development, very, very important, because so much engagement depends on really good line managers and good leadership. So that's an important contact. Also, whoever looks after reward and benefit, obviously a really important person to talk with, because if you pay people well for a good job and you give them a good deal, you get a good result, usually. Those are two very significant people. But also anybody who looks after HR strategy. because engagement needs to be seen as one part of the overall HR strategy, which of course is one part of the overall business strategy. So those are the people that I would talk with.
Yeah, that's excellent. The process itself, could it be done used now we're talking about digital technology and so on, but engagement in the end it's all about also interaction and people.
Yeah.
So how can we solve this equation, technology and people engagement?
I believe that there is a temptation to think that technology and human interaction are two separate things and are growing further apart. And in some ways, that's true. But also some technologies are bringing us closer and closer together. So for example, we are big users of internal social media within BA. So we use Microsoft Yammer, like a lot of businesses around the world use Yammer. There are other ones, Jive, for example, Slack. That is a technology solution. You and I might not be physically together, but we're having a very, very good conversation, a human conversation, created through that technology platform. So actually it's bringing our people closer together. So I'm a big believer that there are lots of ways that technology and people are actually interfacing much more than we think of.
Yes, it depends on how you see it and how you're going to implement it and how you communicate it to your people, part of the culture.
But I mean, the most valuable thing for me still is a conversation like this. Unfortunately, with so many people...
But being realistic...
it's tough.
Yeah, exactly. Well, also in engagement, we always say employee engagement.
Yeah, but we don't at BA. Colleague engagement at
Colleague
BA.
engagement
at BA.
So can you tell me the difference?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in overcoming organizational hierarchy. I don't like the word employee. I don't like the word staff because it suggests a hierarchy. And BA is hierarchical. We do have a hierarchy, but we're trying to flatten it out. If we're all colleagues or all teammates or all part of one family, that feels to me much more equal. And if you reduce hierarchy, I believe you become a more engaged organization.
Well, that's very true. And bringing this to practice, maybe did you face any challenges with other business leaders who might think in a different way, that they actually support the hierarchy and they want it to be that way? And I'm sure that's the case in many organizations.
I think there is a generation of business leaders, generation before Generation X, so the baby boomer leadership population, who were brought up when society in the West was much more hierarchical.
That was the nature of life.
That was the nature of life.
Yeah.
Then Generation X, my generation, began to challenge hierarchy, but still respect it. Now we have millennials and Generation Z. They really don't like hierarchy. They will not tolerate it. They don't believe in it. So no matter what business you're in, you have to accept that the talent of tomorrow that's coming into the business already today will not tolerate hierarchy. And if you want to get value out of that talent, you need to flatten out.
Yes, indeed. If you can give us advice, Joe, as engagement is only focused on a certain level, what about the engagement of leaders? Is there a lack of engagement in leaders in organizations in general, you believe? Because I'm sorry, but no. I believe all the focus is on a certain employee engagement. What about the leader engagement? Are they engaged?
So if we look at the pyramid, and we've got most of our people at middle manager, junior manager, and then colleagues. Leaders are an interesting population. They're very privileged. They usually earn more money than other people. They're also under greater pressure, usually, than the rest of the population. But they have the privilege of knowing everything about the business. They know where it's going. They know what all the performance measures are. They know about new, interesting product development. They know everything before anybody else. I'm very keen that leaders use that knowledge to engage other people. To do that, they have to overcome the temptation to withhold knowledge. You know, that old thing that
Yes.
knowledge is power?
Yes.
I don't believe that's the case. I think really good leaders share the knowledge.
Giving
with other
is
people.
power, or sharing
Giving
is power,
is power.
now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Drew, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For sharing your experience with us, your knowledge, your great insights on colleague engagement.
Colleague engagement, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's really
Great to
been my
meet you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.